What's up, everybody? Ron Placone here, reporting for Status Coup. So, for a long time, every day I would wake up in the morning like one does, and I would say to myself, have we hit rock bottom yet as a country? I stopped asking that question because each day I would find out that nope, no, we haven't, and I don't know how close or far we are. But thinking about it will kind of drive one crazy. So I kind of stopped asking that question. But here is some news that we can file under. Well, we haven't hit rock bottom yet, but holy shit, is the ship sinking. Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks has decided to run for president. I'll go ahead and give a pause for laughter. Let's go straight to the video. He made this announcement yesterday. We're gonna go straight to it now.
Here to make that announcement in the capacity as a guest is Cenk Uygur.
Yes.
Cenk.
First of all, you can't be a guest on your own network. This is, and by the way, as we go through this, you're gonna hear how ridiculously rehearsed this sounds. But anyway,
you do have this big announcement. Although you've already kind of made it on the set of Breaking Points, but now it's official.
Yeah, no, I had not yet made up my mind, but I have now, and I have filed. I will be running for president of the United States of America. Let's change the course. Right now, Joe Biden is down 24 points in the economy, 19 points on jobs when he actually did better on jobs than Trump did. He's down 13 points from where he was in 2020. He is not going to win. I am running. Yes, I am a break glass in case of emergency candidate. It should not have been me. It should have been someone else, but unfortunately it was not anyone else. Democrats have gotten none of their message out. We need a real strong primary. So my job is to be basically Paul Revere. Biden's gonna lose, Biden's gonna lose, Biden's gonna lose. We gotta go now. We have to change that dynamic. So I'm gonna, yes, pressure Biden to get out of the race. So if he leaves now, he's a hero. If they're not gonna, and they always say about the general elections, oh, we have to keep the money in politics because we're not doing unilateral disarmament, then.
First of all, it's interesting that Cenk Uygur chose to make a Paul Revere reference, considering some of the comments about bestiality Cenk has made over the years. It's peculiar he would compare himself to a guy who's famous for riding a horse. But anyway, so Cenk is entertaining this idea that he's the only person with this radical notion that Joe Biden is a weak candidate, that isn't common consensus that people have had from the primary in 2020 onward, that people have had since the frickin' 80s, for crying out loud. I mean, Joe Biden failed running for president multiple times before he failed his way up in 2020. Many contend, and I'm one of these people who contends it, if it wasn't for the complete mishandling of the pandemic, Trump would have won. But so many people just looked at the state of the world and they said, we got to get this guy out of here and get someone else, whoever it is. Because of that, a stale ham sandwich would have beat Donald Trump. But had those circumstances not been there, I fully believe Trump likely would have won again. So it's not in any way remotely insightful that Biden is a weak candidate. I don't understand why Cenk thinks he needs to be the one to carry this message that is shared by most Americans, really. The reality of the situation is Democrats want to prop up their corporate-approved candidate, and if they can't prop up Biden, they're going to just prop up a Biden clone, and there's plenty waiting in the wings. Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, go ahead, go down the list. And they're not going to have an honest primary. They already said as much. So this is just a vanity project. He's probably not going to get any chance on the debate stage. He's probably not going to reach any relevant numbers. Keep in mind, this is a guy who in the congressional district that he ran it failed to gain any momentum whatsoever. I think he finished in about 4th or 5th. And you think you're going to make a significant dent in a presidential primary, the biggest office in the land? It has been proven time and time again that popularity on YouTube doesn't translate into the ballot box. And Cenk Uygur's one of the people who helped prove this. He proved it in a congressional district. But there's more to this. But so that right there, you see why this is an absolute just ridiculous notion to do. By the way, Cenk Uygur also just released a book. I'm sure it's a total coincidence.
I'm not doing unilateral disarmament. I don't know that I'm going to have a huge amount of big dollar donors that come in and create super PACs for me, but I might. And if I do, God help you. Me with money, they're in a world of trouble.
This is coming from the guy who was given $20 million for his network and completely just mishandled all of it. We'll get more into that later. But yeah, him with money, you're in big trouble.
So if there's super PACs that come in and they do independent expenditures, have at it, Hoss. Go for it. And if you don't like it, then make sure that there's no dark money in the Democratic primaries, which is a position that I want.
So this is his justification for taking corporate money. This is him saying, I'm going to take corporate money. This is the mental gymnastics that he's employing. This is a long way of saying, well, if you can't beat them, join them. They're taking corporate money, so am I. Oh, and by the way, I'm campaigning on getting corporate money out of politics. Of course, my campaign's not going to go anywhere. So just give me a bunch of money, and that's going to be the end of it. And there's my justification. Just so you all know that that's what is happening there. This is Cenk saying, I'm going to take corporate money unapologetically. And it's okay in this circumstance because here's my mental gymnastics. So that's where we're at. All right. Now I think at this point in the in this interview, they get to the point where they bring up the fact that Cenk Uygur was not born in the United States, which via the Constitution bars somebody for running from running for president. Here is his answer to that.
So, Cenk, the big issue, the big obstacle kind of standing in your way is the fact that you were born in Turkey, you immigrated to the United States at 8 years old, you are a naturalized citizen, but my understanding is that only US-born citizens can run for president. You disagree with that, why?
Yeah, the case law is completely on my side. So this conventional wisdom, we've all heard it. We heard it in 8th grade civics class and it's stuck in our heads. It was an easy thing to remember, right? Oh, if you're not born here. And by the way, there's 25 million Americans who are naturalized citizens. And every one of us has heard about 200 times in our lives, you can't run for president. Now, look, guys, the people who say that, they just remember it from school. They don't mean any harm by it, right? But for those of us who hear it, what we're hearing is you're not really fully American. We don't trust you.
No person except a natural born citizen or a citizen of the United States at the time of the adoption of this Constitution shall be eligible to the office of president. Neither shall any person be eligible to that office who shall not have attained to the age of 35 years and been 14 years a resident within the United States.
So Anna, it's a great question, especially because for folks who are not familiar with constitutional law, but although all of you will get it instantly, the amendments obviously amend the original Constitution.
Right.
And what I just read to you in Schneider is the Supreme Court said very clearly that the Fifth Amendment amended the Constitution to make naturalized citizens have the same exact rights because of due process.
Okay, so that's his response to that. There was an amendment, and the Supreme Court that ruled that amendment did allow naturalized citizens, which he is, to run for president. So there is his response to that issue. He's saying like, hey, I should be good. So he does have a response to that fact that he was not born in the United States. So let's get into it. Now, a lot of times when videos like this are published, and for those of you who know me, you know that I genuinely try to stay out of this stuff. I don't really find any value in talking about other YouTubers. I don't really watch many YouTube shows, so I don't really have anything to add anyway. But in the case of the Young Turks and Cenk Uygur, sometimes people, they see videos like this and they think that either from myself or whoever else, oh, this sounds like sour grapes. I just want to put it out there right away that I have no reason to have any personal sour grapes with Cenk Uygur. In fact, if I'm being honest, as an individual, it's actually the opposite. If it wasn't for Cenk Uygur, there's a good chance I wouldn't be where I'm at today. Because of Cenk Uygur, I met Jimmy Dore and, ended up working on that show. Now, obviously, I have left that show. I quit a while ago. But, had it not been for that show, I never would have met Jordan. I mean, you guys get the idea. I mean, it was sort of the whole snowball effect of many things that have happened in my life kind of started with TYT, which indirectly started with Cenk Uygur. So I have no reason to have any ill will towards him personally. However, as somebody who cares about independent media and cares about journalism and sees the value in it and sees the importance of it, I got a lot of complaints about Cenk Uygur, as many, many people do, and it is very justified. So let's back up a little bit to when the whole thing was starting, doing news on YouTube and things like that. I will give credit where credit is due. Cenk Uygur, along with a lot of the people he surrounded himself with, many of whom, never really got a lot of credit, they helped create the model, or they basically pioneered the model of what it means to do news on YouTube. The clipping segments that later evolved to live streaming. Cenk Uygur was a pioneer in that space, or well, TYT in general was a pioneer in that space. So they had an opportunity. They had an opportunity, especially when they got $20 million in Katzenberg money. They had an opportunity to build grassroots journalism all around the country. They could have had bureaus. They could have had boots on the ground everywhere, bringing you stories about environmental destruction, bringing you stories about fracking, bringing you stories about war and peace, bringing you stories about unions, bringing you stories about strikes and protests, which, by the way, just a side note, we have one of the biggest labor uprisings that this country has ever seen in arguably nearly 100 years. It's happening right now. Status Coup has been on the ground for 25 days. Well, Cenk Uygur and TYT, who has infinitely more resources, is having a vanity presidential run and a staged interview. That's what they're doing. So over the years, they had an opportunity to build all these things. And what did they build instead? Well, instead, they just invested into opining personalities. A lot of the online personalities Cenk Uygur invested in, he's not even on speaking terms with anymore. Dave Rubin, Jimmy Dore, Michael Tracy, Jordan Sheraton, which, by the way, whenever TYT would invest in journalism, they would later fire those journalists. They invested in, they're an alternative news network. They're supposed to be an alternative to the mainstream news model, and they decided to invest in Dan Rather. So you just see misstep after misstep. And instead of creating, I mean, I am old enough to have seen the independent online video news space go from this obscure thing to becoming a force to be reckoned with. And instead of having more outlets like Status Coup that are actually doing journalism and breaking stories, the lay of the land seems to be opining about Twitter beefs, opining about other YouTubers, and basically having a professional wrestling match, minus the physical skill, of course. And the challenge is just flapping your gums into a webcam. That is what Cenk Uygur has largely pioneered. And what a huge missed opportunity. What a huge missed opportunity. And I'm not putting all of that on Cenk Uygur. That's completely unfair to put on one person. But looking at it as a whole and seeing the moment that TYT was on the precipice of and seeing how that was completely squandered, it's hard not to feel a ton of frustration towards that whole thing. And I do feel it. So now let's get into the last time I had a pretty big problem with something Cenk Uygur said and did. Cenk Uygur here in Los Angeles, which is where Cenk Uygur lives, he endorsed Rick Caruso for mayor. Now, to be totally fair out the gate, both candidates were pretty lousy. The choices were Rick Caruso, Karen Bass, both were pretty lousy candidates. But the reason LA was in the situation it is in, first of all, local politics is way different from state and federal. And if you don't realize that, you have no business commenting on it. And the reason LA is in the situation it's in is because our former mayor, Mayor Eric Garcetti, had a very laissez-faire attitude towards the city in general. And he basically gave the developers the keys and said, do whatever the hell you want. I don't care. Rick Caruso is a billionaire developer who has a pretty bad history in Los Angeles and just in general. So by supporting someone like Rick Caruso, you are completely endorsing more of the same. And you're saying, hey, instead of giving the developers 95% of what they want, which they have with Eric Garcetti, and it was a disaster, we're going to ensure they get 100% of what they want with Rick Caruso. And Cenk Uygur's logic was that Karen Bass is quote unquote more of the same solely because she comes from a traditional corporate Democrat tradition, which is true. She does. But again, you can't view the mayorship through that lens. In reality, with Karen Bass, the developers are going to get about 90% of what they want as opposed to 100. And that extra 10% is going to make a big difference. Has Karen Bass been a lousy mayor? Yes. Has she been a little bit better than Eric Garcetti? Yes. Is she better than Rick Caruso would have been? Yes. And the fact that Cenk Uygur couldn't make that association, or if he did, he just didn't care. Because, I mean, if you see some of the clips out there from TYT, some of the stuff I've seen, it's very apparent that when it comes to the homeless, when it comes to cops, they are indistinguishable from Fox News. Maybe he just didn't care. It's tough to say. You know, this is the guy who busted a union in his own company. This is a guy who was, quote unquote, unsure about rent control. You know, this is a guy who his overall politics, calling him a Warren Democrat would be too generous. He would be considered center-right, even within the lens of the United States, which means anywhere else, in any other pseudo-democratic experiment, he would be considered right-wing. Yet his network touts itself as the home of progressives. Oh, and by the way, as of the recording of this, and you know what? I'll double check right now. As of the recording of this, at least when I checked last night, his website, which is just a splash page at this point, but his website does not mention Medicare-for-All. And let's see, it doesn't. It's just a splash page, but guess what it mentions when it comes to healthcare? It says affordable health insurance, a public option. So Cenk Uygur supports a public option. He doesn't even support Medicare for All, according to his own website. And again, we're not going to have an honest primary. We're just not. Cenk Uygur knows this. He knows how the Democratic machine works. Now, before we totally get off the thing with Rick Caruso, when we covered that issue on Status Coup, I speculated that maybe this was the Katzenberg influence talking. They gave him $20 million. Maybe they want to see the developer get elected mayor because that would help out their interest. I retracted that and corrected because actually Katzenberg was supporting Karen Bass. So to give credit where it's due, Cenk Uygur was not succumbing to his donors and that Caruso endorsement. However, Cenk Uygur did do something that I think is likely unheard of in the online commenter space. He defied his donors, basically, from the right. He was to the right of the people who gave him $20 million. Even the people who gave him millions were like, oh, we can't let the developers have all that. That'll be a disaster for this city. Come on. And Cenk Uygur said, no, we should. We should. Because I'm really angry at homeless people. So when someone demonstrates that that's who they are locally, how do you think they would govern as a president or as a congressperson? So, when you see stuff like this, Cenk Uygur is exactly where he is meant to be. He is a provocateur. He is basically a TMZ gossip column that is lightly politically themed. And I use the word lightly because it's appropriate. And they've been that way for a long time. And if you're not going to be a news network, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. This is coming from a guy who's a comedian. But stop branding yourself as a news network. Stop taking people's money under the guise that you're a news network. And stop taking people's money for a complete vanity project. If you give money to Cenk Uygur's campaign, you are basically giving your hard-earned dollars to a man who is having a narcissistic midlife crisis online. That's all this is. It's nothing more than that. And it's sad. And when you see stuff like this, you kind of wonder, does this guy not have a friend to interfere and say, hey, man, what are you doing? I don't know much about Cenk Uygur's personal life. I can't answer that. But based on what I've seen, what little I've seen between him and his nephew, I think he probably does have people in his life who might intervene here and say, dude, what are you doing? He just chooses not to listen to him. And it's pretty sad. It's pretty sad because there's going to be some well-intentioned people out there who give money to this campaign. And this campaign is a profound waste of time. And when you think of the many, many, many things TYT could be doing with their resources, and you look at what we do here at Status Coup with a fraction of the resources, and I'll say this, I don't say this often, but with how ridiculous the whole kind of online media YouTube space has become, when I quit the Jimmy Dore show, I kind of wanted to distance myself from all of it. And when Jordan asked me to do some stuff with Status Coup, I said yes. If it was any other outlet, I probably would have said no. And you might be thinking, gee, Ron, you and Jordan have some strategic disagreements. Why would you say yes to Status Coup and you would have said no to pretty much anyone else? Because Status Coup breaks stories. That's why. Status Coup does a crazy thing called journalism that should be the rule and not the exception. Sadly, it's the exception, not the rule. And that's why I like it here. I like being able to bring something to the table that is contributing to journalism to some extent, whether it's in studio, breaking down these firsthand stories and delivering it, or sometimes I get to go on the ground even. That's why I like it here. And that's why I see TYT as a huge squandered missed opportunity. And it's a true bummer. And that's really all I have to say about the matter. It's just like you see stuff like this and you keep thinking, wow, this is just preying upon desperate people. People are desperate for real change in this country. Real change in this country. And Cenk Uygur is just selling you snake oil. I mean, this is ridiculous. This is just a vanity project. The numbers he's talking about, he's not going to reach them. There's not going to be an honest primary. We all know this. And he's saying this is a guy who started a PAC to get money out of politics, saying he's going to take big money. And giving that ridiculous justification for it. So, wow. Just wow. And I really hope for those of you who are considering donating to this guy's campaign, I hope you look around at mutual aid organizations in your community. I hope you look around at activist organizations, digital rights organizations, human rights organizations. Or if you want to support something in the media space, take a look over here at Status Coup, where we're actually doing journalism. And I really hope you decide to put those dollars to something a little more constructive. I really do. All I got to say about that. 2024, it's going to be a doozy of an election. Guys, and before I get out of here, I will mention I do have a show coming up. I'm not running for office. I'm doing a comedy show. It's okay to do a comedy show. Just make it clear that's what you're doing. I'm doing a comedy show. It's October 21st. It's in San Pedro, California, which is my neighborhood. It's a headliner series. I'm on the show along with Stephanie Blum and Amanda Cohen. You can get tickets at ronplacone.com. Again, that's October 21st. Coming up, it's Saturday night. I have had Status Coup fam at every show I've done this year. That includes Edinburgh, Scotland. So please come on out. October 21st. Tickets at ronplacone.com. And this is Ron Placone for Status Coup, signing out.